Did a man who spent 43 years serving as the right hand of John MacArthur, a man who stood with him through every battle, edited his books, shaped his ministry, and defended his legacy, just get pushed out by John MacArthur's own son? Phil Johnson, the longtime executive director of Grace to You and one of the most respected voices in Reformed and evangelical circles, has officially retired after more than 4 decades of service. But something about the way his departure was handled has left many people deeply unsettled. On his very last day at Grace to You, Matt MacArthur, John MacArthur's son and current president of the ministry, posted a video announcing that Grace to You was beginning something new. But in that entire message, he never once mentioned Phil Johnson's name. There was no thank you, no public appreciation, no acknowledgement of 43 years of faithful and sacrificial service. It almost felt like the ministry was trying to quietly move on from Phil Johnson without drawing any attention to his departure. For many people who have followed Grace to You for years, this felt cold, disrespectful, and even suspicious. Was Phil Johnson's retirement truly just about his health, or was he being pushed out by the next generation of leadership at Grace to You? In this video, we're going to take a closer look at what really happened, and we're going to ask the hard questions that many people are thinking but are afraid to say out loud. Let's get into it. So who was Phil Johnson to John MacArthur? For over 43 years, Phil Johnson was far more than just an employee at Grace to You. He was John MacArthur's closest and most trusted associate. He joined the ministry in the early 1980s and eventually became its executive director. Over the decades, he became deeply involved in almost every major aspect of the work. Johnson edited the majority of John MacArthur's books. He helped shape the theological content and direction of Grace to You's teaching materials. He was the voice behind many of the ministry's radio broadcasts. And perhaps most importantly, he stood with MacArthur through some of the most difficult and controversial seasons of his ministry. Many people viewed Phil Johnson as the guardian of John MacArthur's legacy. As long as Johnson was at Grace to You, people believed the ministry would continue to uphold the same doctrinal convictions and commitment to biblical truth that MacArthur had built it upon. So when Johnson announced his retirement, effective July 1st, 2026, it was not just the departure of an employee. It marked the end of an era. It was the closing of a chapter that had lasted more than 4 decades. With a transition this significant, most people expected Grace to You to publicly honor Johnson's service. Instead, something very different happened. So what was Phil Johnson's official reason for retiring? Phil Johnson gave a clear and public reason for his retirement. In a statement posted on social media, he explained that he had been battling multiple myeloma, an incurable form of cancer, for some time. He shared that his strength and energy had declined significantly, and he no longer felt able to carry the full responsibilities of his role as executive director. Johnson was very gracious in his statement. He expressed deep love for Grace to You and said he was profoundly grateful for the privilege of serving alongside John MacArthur for more than 40 years. He also made it clear that he still cared deeply about the ministry and planned to remain involved in a smaller capacity, specifically as a broadcast announcer and as a volunteer co-pastor. On the surface, his reasons for stepping down seem completely understandable. Many people accepted his explanation without question and wished him well in this new season of life. However, the way his departure was handled by Grace to You leadership has caused many people to wonder if there was more going on behind the scenes than just health concerns. On the same day Phil Johnson was officially leaving, Matt MacArthur released a video that completely ignored his retirement. Now let's talk about Matt MacArthur's strange and telling silence. On Phil Johnson's final day at Grace to You, Matt MacArthur posted a video on social media announcing that the ministry was entering a new season. He spoke about his father's legacy and the future direction of Grace to You. But in the entire message, he never once mentioned that Phil Johnson, the man who had served the ministry for 43 years, was retiring that very day. There was no public thank you, no recognition of Johnson's decades of faithful service, no acknowledgement that one of the most important and long-standing leaders in the ministry was stepping down. To many observers, this silence felt deliberate. It almost looked like Grace to You was trying to quietly move on from Phil Johnson without making his departure a big deal. For a ministry that has spent decades teaching about honor, respect, and biblical leadership, this lack of public appreciation felt deeply disappointing to many people. Some have even gone further and suggested that Phil Johnson may have been pushed out by the next generation of leadership. They believe that certain people at Grace to You saw Johnson as part of the old guard and wanted to bring in new leadership that would take the ministry in a slightly different direction. While we cannot know for certain what happened behind closed doors, the way Johnson's retirement was handled has left many people with serious questions. These questions are now spreading widely across social media and Christian circles. Why are so many people suspicious? There are several reasons why many Christians are questioning whether Phil Johnson's retirement was entirely voluntary. First, the timing and handling of the announcement feels suspicious. Johnson retires on July 1st, and on the same day, Matt MacArthur releases a video about something new without even mentioning him. It feels coordinated and intentional. Second, Phil Johnson has long been viewed as a protector of John MacArthur's theological legacy. Some people believe that certain leaders at Grace to You wanted to move the ministry in a direction that Johnson may not have fully supported. His departure would have made that transition much easier. Third, while Johnson's health issues are real and serious, many people have questioned whether his cancer was the only reason for his sudden exit. Some believe there may have been internal disagreements, power struggles, or differences in vision that also played a role. Even if health was the main reason, the lack of public honor and appreciation for 43 years of service is still deeply troubling. It raises questions about how Grace to You values and treats its longtime servants. This situation should make all of us think more carefully about how ministries treat people. Phil Johnson gave 43 years of his life to Grace to You. He stood with John MacArthur through some of the most difficult seasons the ministry ever faced. He worked behind the scenes to protect and promote sound biblical teaching. And even in his retirement announcement, he remained gracious, humble, and thankful. For a ministry that has spent decades calling the church to biblical leadership and integrity, the way Phil Johnson's retirement was handled feels deeply inconsistent. When a man gives more than 4 decades of faithful service, he deserves to be publicly honored, not quietly ignored on his final day. Whether Phil Johnson was pushed out or simply chose to step down due to health reasons, one thing is clear: Grace to You failed to publicly appreciate and honor a man who gave his life to the ministry. This should serve as a warning to all of us. No matter how big or influential a ministry becomes, it should never treat its faithful servants as disposable. When leaders quietly push out or ignore longtime workers without proper acknowledgement, it reveals a serious problem in the heart of that organization. Phil Johnson deserved better. After 43 years of faithful and sacrificial service, he deserved to be publicly thanked and celebrated, not pushed aside and forgotten. What do you think about this situation? Do you believe Phil Johnson was simply retiring due to health reasons, or do you think he was pushed out by Matt MacArthur and the current leadership at Grace to You? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. This conversation matters. Make sure to like and subscribe. We will continue to speak the truth about what's happening in the church, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Thanks for watching. God bless you.